Hello everyone, this is Haley Weiss and this is my facilitation discussion on the article Why Critical Race Theory Should Be Taught. Start off a little bit about the article. It is published in Psychology Today on its online platform on July 1st of last year, and the author is Pamela B. Parsky, I'm guessing. This is a picture of her here. She's really high up in her field. She has huge list of all these amazing accomplishments, but the two things that I found that she's really working on right now, from what I understand, is that she's a senior scholar at the Network Contagion Research Institute and the director of the Aspen Center of Human Development. So some key points about the article, really the meat of what I saw from the article is first that kind of defining what critical race theory is. Critical race theory is a lens through which people may view the world and racism. It is a larger ideology and not a specific set of facts. The second one there, even though CRT has gained popularity in many educational settings, there are many who push against it being taught specifically in public schools. The third one there is in the settings where it is taught or where it is more accepted, it is kind of viewed more as a truth than a viewpoint, which can get dangerous and complicated, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what is CRT? It is rather complex and kind of this big understanding and ideology, so I wanted to give you our author's specific definition here. She wrote that CRT ideology is premised on the assumption that racism is not an aberration, rather it is systemic and inextricably woven into our social fabric. So I believe all of us in this class, we get this a lot more, and I get this a lot more since starting this class, that it is more systemic and it is large and it affects everyone in one way or another, not just people who are racist or are not racist. It's not specific people, but the system as a whole. And she goes on to talk about later that the ideology and its offshoots create a particular way of seeing race, power, justice, and even knowledge and truth. So like I said, it's very big and complex. I couldn't just say to you in a sentence, if you think CRT is true, then this is what you think. It's a lot larger than that, and I think that's possibly why there's some pushback, because it can get confusing possibly. But the mainly strong focuses are on white privilege and discrimination received by minority races. The author said something about like treating minority races as second-class citizens, just different ways that our society runs that are inherently racist, and that how all white people experience some form of white privilege. So she also talks a lot about the power of language and how that works with CRT. That language can be really powerful. She talked about how a lot of times we use words to describe the world around us, when in actuality they can also be used to change the world around us and to change our perspective. And I found this example that she put in there very interesting, so I want to kind of give it to you guys to help you understand. She said that the prune industry, they were not gaining in sales. They was called prunes, and everybody in the world believed that was that they were mainly used as laxatives. So if you didn't need a laxative, then you weren't going to go buy prunes. So they decided to rebrand and to now call themselves dried dates. So they removed that stigma. They didn't change the fruit at all, but by changing their language, people got to see it as a new thing and did not specifically categorize it in something new, and were in something that they didn't need and possibly something that they could. And she actually goes on to say that once there was this big health movement that's starting, and healthy eating and gut health, that they actually went back to prunes as their name because they thought that that would be more beneficial in their branding. So how we say things and how we phrase things and how we view them has a really big impact, and I thought that was a really cool case of it. Another case that she discussed was started by one of the big advocates of critical race theory, is using the word anti-racist. We talk a lot about how people don't think racism is their issue because, well, I'm not a racist. So she's kind of pushing this language of, okay, maybe the goal isn't to not be racist, but to be anti-racist, to be someone actively fighting against the system. It is not enough to just stand by and say that's not my problem because I'm not a racist, but we are a part of a racist society and we all need to be fighting against it. So the goal is not to be not racist, but to be actively fighting against racism. So changing that language can really change how we view ourselves and what the expectation is. So pushback when it comes to CRT, I like how this author phrased it, is the fact that there are several perspectives on how we view racism in the world, and not necessarily everyone agrees with CRT. It is many people view it as decisive, that like there are the oppressed and there are the oppressors. And for certain people, that definitely rubs them the wrong way. As you can see, many politicians have written laws to prevent critical pedagogy, so critical race theory pedagogy, from being used in public schools. And I was very shocked to hear this. President Trump even tried to use an executive order to ban the curriculum. Fortunately, it did not go through, but I'm just very surprised that this is something that an executive order would be used on. I'm not great about government stuff. I don't understand a lot of it, but I do not believe an executive order should be called on this. But that is just my personal opinion there. So the author also talks about how these laws and this pushback really just confirms what CRT talks about, that we live in a white supremacist culture that will push back against this, that will push back against any success or bringing up of minority cultures or minorities. So that's an interesting dilemma. So here's the debate. Advocates really believe that CRT presents an accurate view of current and historical racism, where opponents believe that CRT is divisive, has stereotyping, has scapegoating. They really just don't want children to view through this lens that it's the oppressor and the victim, the us versus them. They don't want to see, they believe that if you teach this, that they'll see everything in this way, that there has to be a winner and a loser, which is interesting and, possibly a viable fear, but I'm not sure that that's exactly what's happening here, or perhaps there's multiple ways to teach this, which we're going to talk about this later, that how you teach it really affects maybe how these effects would happen. So I want y'all to really focus on this part because this is part of one of your questions, but theories as to why people push back. So there's 4 different ones, and I encourage you, if you think that there's any others, I would love for you to write about that when you do your reflection later. But the first is that they don't understand what CRT is. The second is they're in denial about the realities of racism. The third is they do not agree with the movement for more diversity in the workplace or in our culture. And the last is that they're not wanting the children know about America's racist past. Like I said, I encourage you, if you have encountered any other theories about why people might push back on this, I would love to hear about those. And I really like this quote is that she added, is that neither side can see what their opponents see because they are using a different lens. So they're viewing the situation from a different perspective. So it's really hard to view. And that just goes back to our views and perspectives, brings it all together. So teaching CRT, kind of bringing in as to really why the author thinks why CRT should be taught. Is that it's really become a popular ideal. Like, people are talking about it, people know about it, but it's more being used as indoctrination rather than information or education. So a part of this quote is that rather than allowing for a variety of interpretations, that one lens is presented as the truth. So workplaces or different things are possibly using critical race theory. She said even without saying the words critical race theory, just adopting different things and saying this is the truth. We have to do this, instead of allowing it to be a lens for people to view the world through. In this last point, the author believes that it should be presented as an option instead of a set truth. But she also had a good devil's advocate moment for herself, was that, however, once you really understand CRT, kind of all of the other viewpoints seem inherently racist. So once you really understand what CRT is talking about, any other viewpoint and how it was created and what's going on within that viewpoint seem to have racist tendencies. So here's your facilitation questions. I gave you two, so you could have options. So the first is, of the theories of why people push back against CRT, which one do you or people around you most likely relate to? And what would you do to try to inform yourself or someone else on the matter, so maybe they could push back a little less? Or the second one is, as educators, is it our job to guide students to a certain way of thinking, or to give them all of the information and allow them to make the decision for themselves? That second one, I really had to think about through this, and it's hard. So I'm really curious to hear your opinions on it. And the last is our references. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you, guys.